They say being a mother is like having your heart live outside of your body, and for the longest time, that was my reality. Every single decision I made, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, I did it all for my daughter, Emma. She was my world, my purpose, the reason I kept going, even when life seemed impossible. But nothing prepared me for the day my world came crashing down, the day I realized just how invisible I had become in her life. It was a normal day, like any other. The sun was streaming through the windows, casting golden patches on the floor as I went about my daily chores. I was carrying a basket of laundry, heading down the hallway, just doing what needed to be done. It was the kind of thing I did day in and day out, with hardly anyone noticing, but I didn't mind. This was my role, my place in the world, and I had convinced myself that it was enough. Then I heard it. A voice, my daughter's voice, ringing through the house, bright and full of love. And she was calling out a word that stopped me in my tracks. A word I never expected to hear. Dad. For a second I thought she was talking about her real father. But he hadn't been in the picture for years, not since she was too young to remember. No, she was talking to Tom, her stepdad, the man I had married in the hope of building a new life, a better life for us. And now she was calling him Dad, as if he had been there all along, as if he had somehow earned that title in a way I never could. I froze in the middle of the hallway, my heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The word echoed in my mind over and over, filling the quiet spaces in a way that felt so wrong, so final. I felt a strange, hollow ache settle deep inside me, a sadness so profound it was as if I had been holding on to it for years without even realizing it. I leaned against the wall, my fingers gripping the laundry basket so tightly my knuckles turned white. I stood there, barely breathing, just listening to her laughter, her voice, the warmth in every word she spoke. She sounded so happy, so full of life, so secure. But as I listened, all I could feel was emptiness, a void that seemed to expand with every laugh, every syllable, every moment they shared without me. It felt like I was watching them from a distance, like I was an outsider in my own home. The life I had built, the family I had sacrificed everything for, it was slipping away right before my eyes, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. In that moment, memories came flooding back, memories of the years I had spent raising Emma on my own. I could remember every sleepless night, every hour I had spent working to make sure she had everything she needed, every choice I had made to keep her safe and happy. I remembered the times I held her when she was scared, the nights I stayed up beside her bed when she was sick, the times I went without so that she would never feel the weight of our struggles. I had been her mother, her father, her friend. I had given her everything I had, everything I was. And now, with a single word, it felt like none of it mattered. Like I had somehow failed, even though I had given everything. A tear slipped down my cheek and I let it fall, feeling too drained to hold it back. I felt like I was being erased, like the life I had built was no longer mine. I stood there in the hallway, listening to their voices, their laughter, and it was like I was looking into a world that had no space for me. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, replaying that moment over and over in my mind. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear her voice calling him Dad, and every time it felt like a fresh wound, a reminder of all that I had lost. I tried to tell myself that it didn't matter, that it was just a word. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was a reflection of a reality I had been too afraid to see. Raising Emma on my own was never part of the plan. Her father and I had married young, full of dreams and promises about the future we would build together. We had it all figured out, or so we thought. But life has a way of shattering even the best-laid plans. When Emma was barely 2 years old, he left. He didn't give me a reason, didn't try to make it work. He just walked away, leaving me holding the pieces of a broken family. And in the blink of an eye, I went from being someone's wife to a single mother, with nothing but a little girl who depended on me for everything. Those early days were hard. There were nights I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how I was going to do it all on my own. I'd run through lists in my mind, trying to figure out how I'd make the bills stretch, where I could cut back, what I could go without. The fear was constant, a weight that sat on my shoulders every second of every day. But every time I looked at Emma, every time I saw her little face looking up at me, I knew I couldn't give up. She needed me, and no matter how scared I was determined to give her the life she deserved. So I worked, harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I took on extra shifts, worked weekends, sometimes even took on night shifts just to make ends meet. There were days I'd come home so exhausted that I could barely keep my eyes open. But as soon as I saw her, all the fatigue, all the stress seemed to fade away. She would run into my arms, her little voice calling out, "Mommy!" And it was like nothing else mattered. I would hold her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling her little arms around my neck, and in those moments I knew that every sacrifice, every struggle was worth it. I remember those times with a strange kind of nostalgia, as painful as they were. There was a bond between us, a closeness that I thought could never be broken. It was just the two of us against the world, and I would have done anything to protect her, to keep her safe. I took on the role of both mother and father, trying to fill the void her father had left behind. I wanted her to feel loved, to feel secure, to know that no matter what, I would always be there for her. As the years went by, I became so used to sacrificing for her that I stopped thinking about my own needs, my own dreams. I put everything on hold, my career, my personal life, my happiness, all to give her a life that was as stable and fulfilling as I could make it. I missed out on friends, on opportunities, on the things that once made me feel alive. But none of it mattered, because every sacrifice was for her. Every choice was a reflection of the love I had for my little girl. Then, Tom came into our lives. I met him on one of my rare nights out, a night I almost didn't go on because I felt guilty for leaving Emma with a babysitter. But my friends had insisted, practically dragged me out of the house, and that's when I met him. He was kind, charming, someone who made me feel seen, something I hadn't felt in years. He listened when I talked, asked about Emma, seemed genuinely interested in my life. For the first time, I felt like maybe there was hope, like maybe I didn't have to do it all alone. We took things slow, for Emma's sake. I wanted to make sure she was comfortable, that she understood he was there for both of us. At first, she was hesitant, shy around him, clinging to my side whenever he was near. But over time, she began to warm up to him. I watched as they built a bond, as they started to share little jokes, little moments. It was beautiful to see, and I told myself that this was what I had always wanted for her. A family, a sense of stability, a father figure who could be there for her in ways I couldn't. But as their bond grew stronger, I started to feel a shift, a subtle but undeniable change in the dynamic of our home. It was little things at first, moments that felt insignificant, but left me with an uncomfortable feeling I couldn't quite place. Emma would run to Tom with her news, her excitement, her little worries, and I would watch from the sidelines, feeling a pang of something I couldn't identify. I told myself it was normal, that it was a good thing she was close to him, that it meant we were becoming the family I had always dreamed of. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being replaced. As time went on, the feeling only grew stronger. Birthdays, family dinners, celebrations, moments that were once so filled with love and togetherness began to feel hollow, like I was a guest in my own life. I would spend hours planning Emma's birthdays, decorating the house, baking cakes from scratch, going above and beyond to make sure everything was perfect. I wanted her to feel special, to know how much she meant to me. But every year it felt like she drifted a little further away. She would blow out the candles, open her presents, and then run off to tell Tom about her new toys, her new dreams, leaving me behind with a pile of wrapping paper and a hollow ache in my chest. I became the person who kept everything together, the person who made sure everyone was happy, comfortable, cared for. But somewhere along the way, I had lost myself. My role had become so ingrained, so automatic, that I stopped thinking about what I wanted, about who I was outside of being a mother and a wife. I was always there, always dependable, always willing to put myself last for the sake of my family. And I convinced myself that this was what love looked like, that this was what being a good mother meant, sacrificing everything, even your own happiness, for the people you love. But the truth was, I felt invisible. I felt like I was fading away, like the version of me that once existed had been slowly erased, replaced by a version that only existed to serve others. I couldn't remember the last time I had done something just for myself, the last time I had pursued a dream or followed a passion. I was always too busy, too tired, too focused on keeping everything together to think about myself. And now, standing in the kitchen, watching Emma and Tom laugh together, share secrets, build memories without me, I felt a sadness so deep it was as if I was mourning a part of myself that I would never get back. It was more than just the word dad. It was everything that went with it. The way Emma looked at Tom, the way she laughed at his jokes, the way she ran to him with her secrets and her dreams. Every time I saw them together, I felt something breaking inside me, a feeling of loss that was so deep, so painful, it felt almost like grief. Grief for the bond we used to share, for the closeness I thought would last forever. One evening, I was setting the table for dinner, placing each plate carefully, making sure everything was perfect. It was a little ritual I had kept for years, a way of showing my love, my care, of creating a space where we could come together as a family. I hoped, maybe foolishly, that the simple act of sharing a meal would remind them that I was still here, that I was still a part of this family. As I laid down the last fork, I heard Emma call out from the living room, "Dad, can you come here for a minute?" Her voice was soft, warm, filled with an affection that I hadn't heard directed at me in a long time. Tom got up without a word, leaving me standing there, watching them as they disappeared into the other room together. I tried to ignore the ache in my chest, the hollow feeling that seemed to settle deeper every time they shared a moment without me. But it was impossible to ignore. No matter how hard I tried, the pain was there, raw and real, a constant reminder of all that I had lost. After dinner, as usual, they both left the table, retreating to the living room without a second glance. I stayed behind, gathering the dishes, scraping leftovers into the trash, feeling the weight of the silence pressing down on me. It was a ritual by now, this quiet cleanup, this solitary routine. I took my time, each plate feeling heavier than the last, as if the weight of all the years, all the sacrifices, was bearing down on me in a way I could no longer carry. As I stood there, washing the dishes, I thought about all the times I had done this exact same thing, night after night, year after year. The countless meals I had cooked, the hours I had spent in the kitchen, the endless list of chores that seemed to multiply every day. I had always told myself that it was worth it, that this was what being a mother, a wife, a caretaker meant. But now, with every dish I washed, every pot I scrubbed, it felt like I was erasing myself, like I was slowly disappearing, one act of service at a time. I glanced over at the empty chairs, the abandoned plates, the crumbs on the table, and felt a tear slip down my cheek. It was ridiculous, really, to feel so emotional over something so small, so ordinary. But that's what it was, an accumulation of all the little things, all the unacknowledged moments, all the ways I had been there, silently, without recognition or gratitude. I finished cleaning up, dried my hands, and stood in the kitchen, staring at the darkness outside the window. The quiet of the house felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, filling every corner, every empty space. I wanted to scream, to cry, to break something, to do anything that would release the overwhelming sadness, the loneliness that was consuming me. The days turned into weeks, and the feeling only grew stronger. I began to notice more and more the little ways in which I was excluded, the small moments that reminded me of how far I had drifted from the center of my own life. Emma would come home from school and go straight to Tom, showing him her homework, telling him about her day. She would sit beside him on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder, her voice full of excitement as she shared her latest adventures, her dreams for the future. I would stand in the doorway, watching them, feeling like a ghost, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. I would try to join in, to offer my thoughts, to ask her about her day, but my words would fall flat, ignored, as if I was an interruption, a distraction from the bond they shared. I had become the person who kept everything running, who made sure the fridge was stocked, the clothes were clean, the bills were paid, but beyond that, it felt like I was nothing. One evening, I found myself sitting alone at the kitchen table, long after everyone else had gone to bed. I stared at the empty plates, the crumbs, the remnants of a meal that had been shared without me. I traced my finger along the edge of the table, feeling the smooth wood, the scratches and dents from years of use, memories that I had thought would bind us together, but that now felt like ghosts, echoes of a life that was no longer mine. I thought about the years I had spent creating this home, the countless hours of work, the endless list of things I had done to make sure they were comfortable, happy, cared for. And in that moment, I realized something that shook me to my core. I had become invisible. I had given so much of myself that there was nothing left, nothing that was truly mine. I was a caretaker, a provider, a background character in their story, but I was no longer a person. I was no longer me. The realization hit me with a force that took my breath away. I sat there, my hands trembling, feeling a sadness so profound it was as if I was mourning a part of myself that I had lost long ago. I thought about the woman I used to be, the dreams I once had, the person I had been before my world became centered on everyone else. I remembered the things I used to love, the passions I had put aside, the hopes I had buried beneath the weight of responsibility. I wanted to scream, to cry out, to demand that they see me, that they remember who I was, that they acknowledge all that I had done. But I knew, deep down, that it wouldn't matter. They were happy, they had each other, and as far as they were concerned, I was just there. I was the person who kept the house running, who made sure everything was taken care of, but I was no longer a part of their lives in the way I had once been. And so, night after night, I sat there, alone at the kitchen table, lost in the silence, feeling like a ghost in my own life. One night, after another long day of feeling like a stranger in my own home, I lay awake in bed, staring up at the ceiling. I could hear Emma and Tom's muffled laughter drifting from the other room, the soft sound of their voices filling the quiet of the house. It was a familiar sound by now, one that had once brought me comfort, but now felt like a constant reminder of how far I had drifted from the life I had built. As I lay there in the darkness, a thought crept into my mind, a thought so foreign, so terrifying, that I almost pushed it away. But it lingered, stubborn and persistent, refusing to be ignored. What if I left? The question echoed in my mind, growing louder with each passing moment. What if I walked away from all of this? The thought felt surreal, like something out of a dream. I had spent so many years giving everything to my family, sacrificing my happiness, my dreams, my sense of self, all to create a life for them. The idea of leaving, of choosing myself for the first time, felt impossible. But as I lay there, listening to their laughter, feeling the ache in my chest grow stronger, I began to wonder if maybe, just maybe, it was the only way I could find myself again. I tried to imagine what it would be like to live a life that was mine and mine alone. I thought about the things I used to love, the hobbies and passions I had pushed aside, the dreams I had put on hold. I pictured a quiet little apartment, a space that belonged to me, a place where I could finally breathe, finally feel free. It was a strange, bittersweet feeling, a mix of hope and fear, of excitement and sorrow. But deep down, I knew that something had to change. I couldn't keep living like this, feeling like a ghost, like an invisible figure in my own life. I had lost myself in this family, in the endless cycle of caregiving and sacrifice, and if I didn't do something soon, I was afraid I would never find myself again. The idea of leaving began to take root, growing stronger with each passing day. I kept it hidden, tucked away in the corners of my mind, a secret that I guarded fiercely. I started making small plans, little steps toward a future I had never dared to imagine. I began setting aside a bit of money from each paycheck, just enough to give me a sense of security, a glimpse of possibility. I started thinking about where I would go, what I would do, how I would rebuild a life that had been buried beneath years of selflessness. I kept telling myself that it was just a thought, just a fantasy, something that would pass. But the more I thought about it, the more real it became. I could feel a quiet strength growing inside me, a determination that I hadn't felt in years. It was as if I was finally giving myself permission to matter, to exist outside of the roles I had been filling for so long. One evening, as I was cleaning up after dinner, I caught a glimpse of myself in the kitchen window. The woman staring back at me looked tired, worn out, like someone who had given everything and received nothing in return. Her eyes were dull, her shoulders slumped, her face lined with years of silent endurance. I barely recognized her. She looked like a stranger, someone who had lost herself a long time ago. I whispered to myself, "Who are you?" The question hung in the air, a heavy, unanswerable weight. For so long, I had been waiting for them to see me, to appreciate me, to acknowledge all that I had done. But in that moment, staring at my reflection, I realized that I couldn't wait any longer. They were never going to see me, never going to appreciate the sacrifices I had made. I was nothing more than a background character in their lives, someone who kept everything running smoothly, but was never truly part of the story. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of that realization settle over me. It was painful, a deep, aching sadness that felt like it was breaking me from the inside out. But at the same time, it was liberating. I knew in my heart that I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep giving pieces of myself away, hoping that one day they would notice, that one day it would be enough. I needed to find myself again, to remember who I was before I became a mother, a wife, a caretaker. I needed to be whole, to be someone I recognized, someone I respected. And if that meant leaving, if that meant stepping away from the life I had built, then that was a price I was willing to pay. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of calm that I hadn't felt in years. It was as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders, a heaviness that had been pressing down on me for so long I had forgotten what it felt like to be free of it. I went through my usual routine, making breakfast, packing lunches, tidying up, but there was a new resolve in me, a quiet strength that filled me with a sense of purpose. I knew that it wouldn't be easy. Leaving meant walking away from everything I had known, from the life I had built, from the people I had spent years caring for. But I also knew that staying would mean losing myself completely, and that was a loss I could no longer bear. As I went about my day, I began to take small steps toward my new life. I gathered a few belongings, things that were mine alone, things that reminded me of who I used to be. I packed a small bag, a quiet act of defiance, a symbol of the freedom I was claiming for myself. I set it aside, hidden in the back of the closet, a little reminder that I had a choice, that I was no longer trapped in a life that made me feel invisible. Each day, I added a little more to my savings, a small act of rebellion, a way of carving out a space for myself in a world that had taken so much from me. I began to look forward to the future, to imagine the possibilities that lay ahead. It was a strange, exhilarating feeling, a sense of hope that I hadn't felt in years. But even as I prepared to leave, I couldn't shake the sadness, the guilt that came with the decision. I thought about Emma, about the life we had shared, the bond we had built, the love that had once been so strong. I wondered if she would understand, if she would hate me for leaving, if she would ever forgive me. The thought of losing her, of breaking the bond we had shared, was almost too much to bear. Yet, deep down, I knew that I had to do this. I couldn't keep living in a world where I was invisible, where my love, my sacrifices, my very existence went unnoticed. I needed to be seen, to be valued, to be whole. And if that meant walking away, then that was a risk I was willing to take. The day finally came when I couldn't hold it in any longer. I woke up that morning with a sense of purpose, a clarity that was both empowering and terrifying. I had been preparing for this moment for weeks, quietly gathering my strength, building my resolve. I knew what I had to do, and as much as it hurt, as much as it felt like I was breaking my own heart, I knew it was the only way I could find peace. After breakfast, I asked Tom if we could talk. He looked at me, mildly surprised, but nodded, setting aside his coffee and putting his phone down. Emma was at school, and I knew this was the only chance I'd have to speak to him without interruptions, to say what had been building inside me for so long. I took a deep breath, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. "Tom," I began, my voice steady but laced with a sadness that I could no longer hide. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about this family, and about myself." He looked at me, confusion flashing across his face. "What do you mean?" I continued, struggling to find the words, "that I can't keep living like this. I can't keep giving and giving without anything in return. I've lost myself, Tom. I've given everything I have to this family, to you, to Emma, and there's nothing left of me." His eyes widened, a mixture of shock and discomfort settling over him. Laura, what are you talking about? We're a family. This is what families do. They support each other. They sacrifice. Yes, I agreed softly. They do. And I've been happy to sacrifice, to give everything I have. But it's not enough, Tom. I've lost myself in the process. I feel like a stranger in my own life, like a shadow in my own home. I can't keep pretending that I'm okay, that this is enough. He looked away, fidgeting with the edge of his sleeve, clearly uncomfortable with the weight of my words. Are you saying you're not happy? I'm saying that I'm not even sure who I am anymore, I replied, my voice breaking. I've spent so many years trying to be everything for everyone else, and in the process, I've lost myself. I've lost my dreams, my happiness, my sense of who I am, and it's killing me, Tom. It's breaking me in ways I can't even begin to explain. He stared at me, his face unreadable. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, could see him trying to understand, to make sense of what I was saying. But I knew, deep down, that he would never fully understand. He hadn't lived it, hadn't felt the constant weight of invisibility, the endless sacrifice that had become my life. So, what are you saying? He asked finally, his voice tinged with a mixture of anger and sadness. I'm saying that I need to leave, I replied, feeling a wave of relief wash over me as the words left my lips. I need to find myself again, to remember who I am outside of this family, outside of being a mother, a wife, a caretaker. I need to be me. The silence that followed was heavy, thick with tension and unspoken words. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the confusion, the disbelief. But I could also see the resignation, the understanding that this was something he couldn't fix, something that was beyond his control. Laura, please, he whispered, reaching for my hand. Don't do this. We can figure it out. We can make it work. I shook my head, gently pulling my hand away. I've tried, Tom. I've tried for years to make it work, to be the person everyone needed me to be. But it's not enough. I need to be more than just the person who holds everything together. I need to be whole. And if that means leaving, then that's what I have to do. He looked down, his shoulders slumping, a look of defeat settling over him. I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes, but I blinked them away, refusing to let myself break down. This was my decision, my choice, and as painful as it was, I knew it was the right one. I'm sorry, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I never wanted it to come to this. But I can't keep living in a world where I feel invisible, where my love, my sacrifices, my very existence go unnoticed. He didn't say anything, just nodded, his gaze fixed on the floor. I could see the sadness in his eyes, the regret, but I knew that nothing he said, nothing he did, could change my mind. This was my path, my journey, and it was one I had to take alone. That afternoon, I packed a small bag, just the essentials, some clothes, a few personal items, things that reminded me of who I used to be. I moved through the house in a daze, feeling a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching myself from a distance. The home I had built, the life I had created, it all felt like a memory, a chapter that was coming to an end. As I placed the last of my belongings into my bag, I heard the sound of the front door opening. Emma was home from school, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. My heart ached as I realized what this would mean for her, how it would change her world. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't stay. I couldn't keep living a life that made me feel like a stranger, a life that was slowly destroying me. She walked into the room, her backpack slung over her shoulder, her face lighting up when she saw me. "Mom," she called, her voice filled with the same innocent joy I had loved for so many years. I forced a smile, feeling my heart break all over again. "Hi, sweetie." She glanced at the bag beside me, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "Are you going somewhere?" I took a deep breath, struggling to find the words. "Yes, Emma, I am. I need to go away for a little while. I need to find some things that I've lost. Things that are important to me." She stared at me, her eyes wide, a look of fear and sadness settling over her face. "But why? Why do you have to leave?" I knelt down beside her, taking her hands in mine, feeling the warmth of her skin, the softness of her fingers. "Because, sweetheart, sometimes people need to take time to figure out who they are. Sometimes they need to be alone, to find the things that make them whole." Tears filled her eyes, and she looked at me, her voice trembling. "But I need you, Mom. You're my mom. I don't want you to go." My heart shattered at her words, the pain so intense that I could barely breathe. But I knew, deep down, that this was something I had to do, something that was as necessary as it was painful. "I'll always be your mom, Emma," I whispered, pulling her into a hug, holding her close as she cried against my shoulder. "And I'll always love you more than anything in the world. But I need to do this for me and for you." She clung to me, her little body trembling, and I held her, feeling the weight of my decision, the pain of leaving. But even as my heart broke, I knew it was the right choice, the only choice. As I finally pulled away, I looked into her eyes, seeing the sadness, the hurt, but also a glimmer of understanding. I kissed her forehead, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and whispered, "I'll be back one day, but right now, I need to go." And with that, I picked up my bag, took one last look at the life I was leaving behind, and walked out the door, stepping into a world that was both terrifying and freeing. Leaving that house, walking away from the life I had built, felt like stepping into a different world. The weight of years of sacrifice and silent endurance lifted with every step I took, replaced by a strange, fragile sense of freedom. For the first time in so many years, I was alone. No longer a mother, a wife, a caretaker, but simply me. It was terrifying, yes, but it was also exhilarating, a feeling I hadn't experienced in what felt like a lifetime. I found a small apartment on the other side of town, a modest place with just enough space for me and my thoughts. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Every morning, I would wake up to the quiet, the stillness of my own company, and in that solitude, I began to rediscover pieces of myself I had buried long ago. I started reading again, something I hadn't done since Emma was a toddler. I lost myself in books, stories that reminded me of the dreams I once had, the ambitions I had put aside in favor of a life of service and sacrifice. Some days, I would take long walks through the park, breathing in the fresh air, watching people go about their lives. I would find a quiet bench, sit down, and simply observe, feeling a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. It was a new world, a new life, one where I was free to explore, to dream, to exist solely for myself. I even picked up painting again, a hobby I had loved in my youth but had abandoned when life got in the way. I bought a small set of paints, a canvas, and every evening I would sit by the window, letting the colors flow, losing myself in the strokes and the textures. It was therapeutic, a way to channel the emotions I had carried for so long, a way to heal the wounds that had been hidden beneath layers of duty and obligation. Little by little, I began to feel whole again. I was no longer defined by my roles, no longer confined by expectations. I was free to be whoever I wanted to be, and in that freedom I found a kind of joy that was new, unfamiliar, but deeply fulfilling. Months passed, and with each passing day, the pain of leaving faded, replaced by a sense of peace. I knew that I had made the right choice, that stepping away from the life I had built was the only way I could find myself again. I missed Emma, of course. I thought about her every day, wondered if she was happy, if she was okay. But I knew that this was something I had to do, that my love for her couldn't erase my need for self-fulfillment, for self-discovery. Then one evening, as I was preparing to settle down with a book, my phone rang. The sound startled me, breaking the quiet of my apartment. I looked at the screen, and my heart skipped a beat when I saw Tom's name. I hadn't heard from him since the day I left, hadn't spoken to Emma in months. I felt a pang of guilt, a wave of longing, but I reminded myself that this was my journey, my time to heal. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the answer button, but finally I picked up. "Hello?" There was a pause, a silence filled with unspoken words, and then his voice came through, soft, hesitant. "Laura, it's me." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "Hi, Tom." "I don't know where to start," he said, his voice breaking. "Emma and we miss you. The house isn't the same without you. I didn't understand how much you did, how much you gave, until you were gone." His words were laced with regret, with a sadness that echoed my own, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the old pain, the ache of the life I had left behind. But I reminded myself that I was no longer that person, that I had found something new, something real. "Tom," I replied gently, "I'm glad you understand now. I really am. But I needed this. I needed to find myself, to remember who I am outside of our family, outside of everything I had given." He was silent for a moment, and then with a voice filled with emotion, he said, "Emma, she misses you, Laura. She talks about you all the time, asks when you're coming back. She needs you." Hearing her name, hearing that she missed me, sent a wave of emotions crashing over me. I could picture her, my little girl, the one I had raised, the one I had sacrificed so much for. I could feel the pull of motherhood, the ache of separation, the longing to hold her in my arms, to tell her that everything would be okay. But I knew that going back wouldn't change anything. It would only pull me back into the life I had left, the life where I was invisible, where my needs, my dreams, my happiness were secondary. I had spent too long finding myself, too long building a life that was mine alone. "Tom," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, "I love Emma more than anything in this world. But I can't go back to that life. I can't go back to being invisible, to giving everything and receiving nothing in return. I need to be whole, for her and for myself." He took a shaky breath, his voice filled with sadness. "But what if we tried? What if things could be different? What if we learned to see you, to appreciate you, to really understand what you mean to us?" His words hung in the air, filled with a desperate hope, a plea for forgiveness, for another chance. I felt the weight of it, the pull of the life I had left, the temptation to return, to try to rebuild what had been broken. But as much as I wanted to believe him, as much as I wanted to trust that things could be different, I knew that going back would mean losing myself again. I had spent too long fighting for this freedom, too long searching for this peace. And I couldn't give it up, not even for them. "I'm sorry, Tom," I said, my voice steady. "I'm glad you understand now, and I'm glad Emma has a father who loves her. But this is my path. This is my journey, and I can't go back." He was silent, a silence filled with resignation, with understanding, with a sadness that mirrored my own. "I understand," he whispered finally. I just wanted you to know that you're missed, that you're loved." I closed my eyes, letting the words wash over me, feeling a sense of closure, a sense of peace. "Thank you, Tom. That means more than you know." We said our goodbyes, and as I hung up, I felt a tear slip down my cheek. It was a bittersweet moment, a reminder of all that I had lost, but also a confirmation of all that I had gained. I had found myself, had rediscovered the person I had buried beneath years of sacrifice, and I knew, deep in my heart, that this was where I was meant to be. The call with Tom left me feeling raw, my emotions a complex mixture of relief, sadness, and quiet pride. For years I had longed to hear words like those, to know that I was seen, that my sacrifices were understood. But now that they had finally come, I realized something deeply profound. I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need validation, acknowledgement, or permission to live my life. I had given myself all of that, piece by piece, as I had rebuilt my world around the person I was rediscovering every day. In the weeks that followed, I allowed myself to settle into the life I had created, to truly embrace the freedom I had fought so hard to claim. My apartment had become a sanctuary, a place filled with little tokens of who I was, symbols of a woman who had been hidden but was now fully alive. Every corner of my home reflected pieces of myself I was reclaiming, paintings that hung on the walls, books stacked on shelves, colors and textures that spoke to my soul. One afternoon, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the world go by, I felt a calmness wash over me, a kind of peace that I hadn't known in years. I was alone, yes, but I was no longer lonely. I had become my own companion, my own support, and it was a feeling so liberating, so empowering, that it brought tears to my eyes. I thought of Emma often, of course. There were moments when a song, a scent, or even a glimpse of a mother and daughter walking hand in hand would fill me with a pang of longing. But it was no longer the desperate ache of loss. It was a quiet, gentle remembrance of a love that had defined me but no longer confined me. I loved her deeply, fiercely, but I had come to understand that I could love her from a distance, that I could be her mother without sacrificing my own happiness, my own identity. As the seasons changed, so did I. I began to make friends, people who knew me not as Emma's mom or Tom's wife, but as Laura, a woman with her own story, her own dreams, her own passions. I joined a local painting group, a community of people who shared my love for art, and together we spent countless hours lost in the colors and textures of our creations. For the first time in years, I felt like I belonged. not because of what I could give, but because of who I was. One evening, after a long day of painting and laughter with my new friends, I returned home to find a letter in my mailbox. It was from Emma. My heart skipped a beat as I held the envelope, feeling the weight of it in my hands, wondering what words she had chosen, what she wanted to say. I took a deep breath and opened it, unfolding the piece of paper, my hands trembling slightly. The letter was simple, heartfelt, filled with the words of a young girl who was trying to understand, trying to make sense of a world that had changed in ways she couldn't fully grasp. "Dear Mom," she wrote, "I miss you. I miss the way you used to hold me when I was scared, the way you made everything feel safe. I know you needed to leave, and I'm trying to be okay with it, but I just wanted you to know that I still love you. I still think about you every day. I hope you're happy, because that's what you always wanted for me, right? To be happy. Love, Emma." Tears filled my eyes as I read her words, a mixture of sadness and joy, of love and release. I could feel her sincerity, her love, her longing, and it warmed my heart in a way I hadn't expected. She was growing, learning to navigate the complexities of love and loss, and I felt a swell of pride knowing that she was finding her own path, just as I had found mine. I sat down at my little writing desk, taking out a piece of paper, and began to write back to her. "Dear Emma, my beautiful girl," I wrote, my hand steady, my heart full. "I miss you too. And I want you to know that leaving was never about loving you any less. It was about learning to love myself as much as I love you. I hope you understand that one day. I hope you see that love can be many things, close, distant, quiet, fierce. I am always with you, even if I'm not there. You are in my heart always, and I hope you find happiness in your own life, just as I have found in mine. With all my love, Mom." I sealed the letter, feeling a sense of closure, a sense of peace. Our love had transformed, evolved into something new, something that didn't require proximity or constant presence. It was a love that was deep, enduring, and boundless, a love that could exist alongside the freedom we had both claimed for ourselves. In the days that followed, I found myself thinking less about the past, about the life I had left behind, and more about the future. I had no grand plans, no rigid goals, but there was a sense of openness, a willingness to embrace whatever came my way. I was living each day fully, present in each moment, grateful for the second chance I had given myself. One sunny morning, I stood by the window, looking out at the world with a sense of contentment that filled every corner of my being. I was no longer the woman who had walked away in search of something she couldn't quite name. I had become the woman who had found it, who had discovered that happiness, fulfillment, and love could coexist within her own heart, without the need for validation or approval. I smiled, feeling the warmth of the sun on my face, and whispered to myself, "I am enough. I am whole." And in that quiet moment, I knew, with absolute certainty, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. Life has a way of testing us, of pushing us to the very edge, making us question everything we've ever known. But sometimes, in that darkness, we find the strength we never knew we had. Laura's journey shows us that it's never too late to rediscover ourselves, to reclaim our happiness, and to find peace in choosing our own path. If you've ever felt lost, invisible, or like your story isn't your own, remember, you have the power to change it. You are unbreakable. And like Laura, you can build a life that truly belongs to you. Thanks for watching Unbreakable Stories. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. Join us for more inspiring tales of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable spirit within us all.